exactly 11:42 p.m., Claire saw it. The reflection wasn't hers. It stood behind her in the bathroom mirror, a twisted version of herself with eyes wide open and a smile that stretched too far, unnaturally wide. Claire blinked, and it was gone. But something in her gut told her it would be back. Claire had always prided herself on being practical, someone who dismissed anything that didn't fit into her neatly ordered world. A young lawyer, new to the city, she just moved into a spacious, old apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that looked like it had stories to tell. The place had an old charm, too much maybe, the kind that made the air feel thick, like the walls themselves remembered every moment, every footstep, every breath taken within them. But Claire, ever rational, ignored it. For the first few days, things seemed normal. A few creaky floors, an occasional draft, nothing out of the ordinary. That was until the bathroom mirror. Every time she looked into it, there was something off. At first it was subtle, a shift in the light. The way her reflection seemed to move just a second too late. She shook it off, thinking it was just the lighting, her tired eyes. But then, it started to change. It was a Wednesday evening when Claire first noticed the movement. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth after a long day at work. As she wiped the foam from her lips, she glanced up and froze. Her reflection was smiling. She wasn't. She stared harder, her hand trembling with the toothbrush still gripped in her fingers. Her reflection grinned wider, more unnaturally. Smile split her face in a way that felt wrong, too wide. Then, the reflection tilted its head and whispered, "Come closer." Claire dropped the toothbrush, the sound of it clattering to the sink, filling the silence. Her own reflection didn't stop smiling. It only grew darker. The next night, Claire could barely sleep. The mirror had haunted her thoughts all day, the smile lingering like a nightmare on the edge of her consciousness. She couldn't shake it. It was too real. She thought about throwing a sheet over the mirror. But what if it followed her? What if it could see her anywhere? It wasn't just the smile anymore. The reflection had begun to change, become more than just a reflection. As Claire washed her face the following evening, she saw it again. This time her reflection didn't mirror her movements at all. Her own eyes stared back at her, but the reflection's face moved on its own. It was a mimic, but twisted. It reached out, its fingers tapping the glass slowly. "Come closer," it whispered again. Louder this time. Fear gripped Claire's chest, but she forced herself to walk away, to leave the bathroom. But as she closed the door behind her, she heard a faint scratching sound, like something was scratching at the mirror from the inside. That night, sleep didn't come. Claire sat in her bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. Days turned into a blur. Every time Claire entered the bathroom, the reflection was there, waiting, watching her with that wide, gaping smile. The whispering never stopped. "Come closer. Come see me." She couldn't get away from it. And every time she looked into the mirror, something inside her seemed to unravel. The reflection started changing more. Her own face began to look older, twisted. The eyes were dull and lifeless. Claire tried to avoid mirrors altogether, but they were everywhere. At work, in elevators, even in windows. Her reflection haunted her, lurking in every surface. Her anxiety spiraled. She couldn't escape it. The voice grew louder, more insistent. And then, one night she saw it. The reflection didn't wait for her to move anymore. It moved first. As Claire stood at the sink, brushing her hair, the reflection's hands reached out, fingers curling around the glass, pressing against it with unnatural strength. The glass cracked. Claire stumbled back, gasping for air. The reflection was still there, but now its movements were jerky, unnatural. It was as if it was trying to break free. It was coming for her. Claire could no longer pretend. She was losing herself. That thing in the mirror wasn't just a reflection. It was alive, and it wanted her. One night, she decided to confront it. She would end this. With trembling hands, Claire grabbed the sharpest object she could find, a knife from the kitchen, and approached the bathroom mirror. Her reflection stood still, waiting, smiling that sickening, wide grin. "You can't escape," it whispered. Its voice was cold, empty. She raised the knife. Her reflection mirrored her movement, but as she looked closer, something shifted. Her reflection was no longer smiling. It was frowning, looking back at her, with a horror Claire couldn't comprehend. Her heart pounded. The air felt heavier, like something was pressing on her chest. She thrust the knife into the mirror, but it wasn't the mirror that shattered. The reflection moved, right out of the glass. Claire screamed as the figure stepped out of the shattered mirror, no longer a reflection, but a thing of flesh and bone. It was her, but it wasn't. It was a grotesque, twisted version of herself, its features warped, its smile far too wide, too sharp. It didn't speak anymore. Instead, it lunged at her. The room grew colder and the lights flickered. Claire fought with all her strength, but the thing inside her skin moved faster, its grip tightening. And then just as quickly as it had come, it disappeared, leaving Claire standing there, gasping for air, her reflection now gone from the shattered glass. The apartment was silent now. The mirror was gone, its shards scattered across the floor. But Claire was different. She no longer saw herself in the reflection. Only darkness stared back at her, a twisted version of her face, smiling, waiting for the right moment to take her. The whispers had stopped, but Claire knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Now, every time she looked into any reflective surface, she felt it. The presence, watching, waiting, and one thing was clear. The reflection wasn't done with her. It was just waiting for her to forget. Waiting for the moment it would return. And when it did, it wouldn't just take her face.